really the data analyzation, and this really begins even in the interview. If any of you are qualitative researchers or worked in qualitative research, you understand that this is your first level of analysis when you're hearing the data, hearing the people speak to that. And then the next phase is developing these the initial codes, the meaningful units of the kind of the broad units of the data. And then you take these codes and you search for themes. You look at how they fit together. What is going to, and there's we could talk all day about the qualitative research. There's some researchers who say, oh, well, the themes have to arise, kind of like it's a fog coming up out of the mist, and other people say, no, that's, it's supposed to be top down. But anyway, you look at the codes and then you look at what's there. How can where are these themes coming from? What are these things that we're seeing over and over, again? So with these overall themes, then we went back as researchers and said, are we seeing the same things? Are the same things, are we noting similar things? Does it mean the same thing, to all of us? And then we looked at defining, what does this theme mean? What does discussion or what does communications with schools mean? How is that the same across all of the parents? Are we interpreting it in the same way? And then we went, we wrote it down. We looked at all of this and we made charts, and then we had discussions and to see if what we were looking at was the same across the researchers. All of these different phases are designed to have the validity and reliability built in, so that we know that it's not just this kind of fun warm and fuzzy thing that we're talking about, but it's something that we can actually get valid data out of.
And here we have an example of the US cohort's initial codes, which was phase 2. So again, phase 1 happened when we were conducting the interviews, after the interviews, just going over the transcripts and coming up with these general ideas. So some examples, like essay is my initial, and this is for one interview. And this we did separately, and then we put it all together from each researcher. So early identification of developmental disorder, just the families talked a lot about this process. And then the strengths and the weaknesses, the process of getting a diagnosis, the lack of resources to find professional services, finding information through other parents, which is a very common thing across all parents, all 3 cohorts. Navigating the public school system. So each researcher did this, and then we put it together to move on to the next phase of reviewing that and then deciding the next phase, which was naming the themes. Like what is the label of these from all these similar ideas that we're seeing across researchers from the interviews for that cohort. We came up with these themes: diagnosis and early intervention, communication between home and school, parents and advocates, financial and emotional burdens, and then the impact of COVID-19. And this is the diagram, a visual display of what Cindy explained. So it's the exact same information. And now we're going to talk about the results.
Okay, so in the results, these are the things that we found, and this wasn't anyone who's worked with families. This isn't anything earth-shaking at all. These are the same kinds of things that we know. What we were really trying to find and try to come up with this is, how can we take this information that we all know families need more support, but how can we get past this kind of us-them relationship, that we have with families and schools? What can we do to use this information and to have schools understand, that parents aren't the enemy. They actually they're experts on their children. We're the educational experts, but they're the experts on that child. And how can we work together, so that we can, all do some really cool things. Shahad had the brilliant idea of putting together, we've called it the tool, because we haven't figured out a better name. But really just and that's what we're putting in our paper that we're getting ready.
Yeah.
It's one of our tasks while we're here together is to finish that up, get it sent off for review. But to have some practical ideas. This is where, parents want more communication between home and school. This is how you can do that. This is some ideas of what you can do, to help them. Families are, their financial burdens are just crushing sometimes. This is what we can do, to help to alleviate that.
And to build off on what Cindy is saying, what we have found from the families that we interviewed is that they're struggling and the keynote speaker said very similar things to what we faced. There are a lot of things on paper. Families don't know how to get to these things. And the most common thing was other parents were the most useful resource for parents who have a recently diagnosed child with a disability. And we're like, we have all these resources in all 3 countries, in the US, in Saudi Arabia, and in Australia, countries with so many resources. And however, parents continue to struggle to find these resources and provide to their children a proper education. So to illustrate some of what the families have expressed to us, we decided to pull out some of the quotes from different cohorts. So some families from the US said, the problem with developmental pediatricians is it's really hard to get an appointment at any level. And to get a bad developmental pediatrician, that one of that is sort of mediocre, you may not get the right diagnosis, you may not get the assistance you need in terms of letters and things for the schools. Another parent said, I was unsure how to navigate the system and I didn't understand my options. Another parent said, yeah, I'm just gonna have to deal with the way these teachers run their classroom. But I have to say that, not having the communication between me and the teachers has definitely made this year a lot more difficult. And you see the theme. This was from the US cohort. We move on to the cohort from Saudi Arabia. A parent said, unfortunately, the Department of Education and hospitals did not provide any kind of help. So I started searching on my own and then went to this autism center. The supervisor directed me to a special assist home, so she started sessions with him to improve his condition. Another parent said, I had to diagnose my child at some point 3 times because schools under Ministry of Education ask you for a diagnosis from specific hospitals and centers, and the Ministry of Human Resources and Social Development asked for diagnosis from different hospitals. And the first diagnosis was from the US. So it's like a whole chaos, like nonstop. And really what the parents need is a path to educate their children and to provide the support that they need and not have to worry about these additional burdens, unfortunately. Another parent said, I said, well, first is going to break your family apart, so that was a big challenge. Finance, that was an issue because it's not cheap. And, the themes, the similarities keep going. From Australia, some parents said, none of that information was really ever made available to me in terms of I didn't actually really know what the options were in terms of where he would go. 1, 2, and 3 teachers, very disappointing. This is the grades, or year 1, 2, that's how the system is in Australia. No handover from one teacher to another. Teachers did not know about teaching diverse students, no school policy on autistic disruptive students. And in our presentation tomorrow at, I think, 2 p.m., we're going to talk about the autism school that we're developing in Australia. So if you want to know more about this specific statement and what the rationale, the story behind it, come join us. And then another parent said, he is 10 now, so we started the process with him 3 years ago, and we're still waiting. So it's about 4 or 4.5 years before we get a diagnosis. Developmental pediatricians across the 3 countries have long waiting lists, and parents cannot get early appointments. It's not like you pick up the phone and make an appointment and then no, it's at least 6 to a year-month wait, and this is not okay.
So what we found from this in our discussion is that, yes, parents are, they are experts about their children, but they are also very, very confused, and it is very, it is crushing. It's crushing financially, it's crushing, for relationships. The prevalence of divorce among, families with children with disability is very, very high, and to me, that was one of the most heartbreaking things. Relying on other parents, as, to give them information, oftentimes, this was the best source of information, and that's this emotional support I think is really, really important. But what worries me a little bit about this that come out is that, it's like, how do they know that they're getting valid information? There's all this, well, I heard this and I heard this, and there's this new oil or something that's going to cure autism, and it's worked for this kid, they need evidence-based and scientific information, and they're not going to get that if all they have, is the relationships with other parents. However, that having that relationship with other parents can be really, really powerful. So I don't want to, discount that, at all. So we also wanted to note that through this, I completely lost my train of thought. Shahad, I'm sure it was profound.
So Dulcin, do you remember what she was gonna say? So after we've finished writing the results section and we had the report for what the family's experiences were, that's when we were talking as a group, and I'm like, what are we gonna do with all this information? We started with wanting to understand the process, the experience of the parents of children with developmental disabilities, but this is such valuable information, we have to do more. And that's when the idea of making a list of recommendations for parents and schools came together. We're like, the parents told us the struggles that they're facing, and being in the education system, we know a lot of what's in place. We know some of the conflict of interest that could rise when having a parent or a family with disability, with a child with a disability in the public schools. What basically we can and cannot share in terms of services that we could, the DOE could provide, at least like in the US. And we're still like refining this, and it's gonna look different. But basically for parents, for schools to start, is share resources, especially when the resources are not something they can provide directly, at least where the families can get that information. Explain the resources when possible, or refer them to professionals who can explain them, just so they also don't put themselves in a position where they could get in trouble, unfortunately. Show them where to find these resources. Teach the rights for individuals with disabilities. Again, there's a lot of good stuff on paper, but then the implementation, that's where we have difficult or struggles with. Answer parents' questions accurately and honestly, or refer them to the people who will. Direct to more resources, show them how to apply for the different benefits that they could access, and because it's the right as a parent or a family with a child with a disability. For parents, taking the resources and asking questions. A lot of parents, the keynote speaker said she was very apologetic when she was talking or asking questions about her child, and it's her basic right. No need to be apologetic. Just ask the questions and demand information. But if they don't know what are the rights, of course they're not going to know what to ask for. Asking questions, making appointments, asking more questions, joining support groups. Families of other children have, through our experience, have been the most useful tool or resource for the families. So connecting with other parents who are in similar situations, work with schools and professionals, providing feedback on their child's education, demanding to be involved. They are the biggest advocate for their child. They have to be involved in adding goals to their IEPs, just giving their priorities, what they want their child to learn, and then learning their rights and their children's rights. And to end,
Hi,
yeah, sure.
I think one thing that something that came out of this is that we need to be kind to parents, because they have, oftentimes we say, well, parents, they should be more involved, or they should be, I tried to call them and they haven't responded. We have parents who are working 2 or 3 jobs to be able to provide, the services, that their children need. They're emotionally drained, with all the things that they have to do, for their children. We know that as teachers, we're overworked. We don't have lots of extra time. What we want to come through to this, though, that if we can open more effective avenues of communication, then it's going to benefit both groups. It's not going to create more work for parents. Imagine if you have one family who files a lawsuit, that instead of filing that lawsuit, you could have a good communication. Think about how much time that would save, besides all the other reasons that we don't want to have lawsuits. Think about how it would help that family. So that's what we want to come through. We're not trying to say everybody needs to work harder. Everybody needs to work smarter and talk more effectively.
To end our presentation, I come from a single design background, so being involved in this qualitative study has been eye-opening. We look at data points, we look at graphs, we look at the trend. How's the performance going? So hearing families firsthand explaining their experiences and how much they struggled, it was so emotional. And while it's great that we have a lot of resources, if anything, it shed light on, unfortunately, how much work still has to be done. And there are great efforts, but we just got to keep going. Thank you.
I volunteer as a parent, and I hear them all say, I'm so tired. Even when their kids are little and when their kids are adults.
ಈ ಸೆಷನ್ ಆದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಒಂದು ಬ್ಯಾಟ್ರಿ
Yes. I think we have to prepare for the next presentation, but if anyone has any other question.
I think we're here, so don't worry, we're fine.
Yeah, perfect. So.
I was going to say, for our presentation, it's an interesting transition. You said that a lot of families have to move to get the services they need.
Yeah.
And kind of a background of what we do was the UN and the World Monetary Fund worked to find how they could lift the poorest of the poor out of poverty.
Yeah.
And they did the typical development plan that you would do, and it failed miserably. And when they went back to see what the problem was, they found that 20 to 25% of the world's poor were families with people with disabilities.
Yeah.
And that the normal monetary uplift did not reach them.
Yeah.
And they're kind of what we've tried to do is what they said, is that you have to organize the disabled in the developed world.
Yeah.
And have them organize their community to reach out to those in the developing world. Not that these are the developing worlds, but the point is, it does add that additional challenge. It does bring people into poverty. You can't work to your capacity to care for a disabled child.
Absolutely.
But I don't hear that enough, that 20% of the world's poorest are those either disabled or caring for them.
Yeah, it's not so easy, to pack and relocate and go some
Yeah.
whole other
And
continent.
you're the first person I've even heard say that. So.
Yeah. So in the Saudi cohort, a lot of families did that. And then it was really two extremes. Either they were able to do it, they have the finances, the background, the means to do it, and then the others were like, there's nothing we can do. We are here. There are no additional supports that can be provided to our children in the public schools, and in private schools they have to pay a lot of tuition to get in. So, yeah.
one of the families I interviewed in Australia were, the mom and dad, they were Malaysian, they come to Australia. They had 2 children with disabilities, and they were working, they had 2 businesses and 2 additional jobs, and they were working, so there's 2 people with 4 businesses, or 4 jobs, and these businesses were really high, it took a lot of energy, a lot of time. They were like, they had, like a kebab shop or, things like that took lots of time, and it was hard work, to do those. But they did that, and then in between all of that, they juggled taking their children to all these appointments and, different things. It was just really, really heartbreaking. But one of the reasons that they came from Malaysia and tried to come to Australia was in hope of being able to be somewhere they get more resources for their children. It's really, really heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking because then they're losing their family support.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think more than likely, people with disabilities really depend on their families for emotional, financial, physical support, with their child. So when you lose that.
And when I think about it, for every family like that who have immigrated to another country to try, there's 30 more families who don't have the resources, to be able to immigrate. They have no very, very few options. Yeah. Thank you all
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. We're on a good path.
Yeah. So Carrie logged into her email. I'm not sure if you shared the presentation.
We don't have a presentation, we have a handout.
Okay, well, awesome. So should I turn off the projector?
Yeah, that would be great, thank you. Nora, do you have the others? You wanna pass those out over here to these ladies who just presented? Okay, I'm just setting things up. There are a whole lot of us doing this presentation, so you guys can
Just come up and join. It really is more of a discussion than anything, so come on up.
Go ahead, sure, if you want.
Alright, so welcome to Diversity is a Fact, Inclusion is an Act. We are the Chautauqua Charter School from Panama City, Florida in the US. And today we have students, staff, mentors, partnership members, and volunteers with us. And I'm going to pass the microphone around so we can all shortly introduce ourselves. Very shortly, I'm Eloise, I'm a traveling mentor.
I'm Chris Palfrey, I'm an administrator at Bay High School.
I am Carissa Boston, and I am a staff at Chautauqua Learning Center Charter School.
Hi, I'm Ashley Warren, and I'm a staff at Chautauqua High School.
I am Nora, and I am also a traveling mentor.
My name is Cadence, and I'm a student at Chautauqua Charter School.
Hello, I'm Jason Michael Allen. I'm a student of Chautauqua Learning Center School.
Hi, my name is Haley, and I'm a student from Chautauqua Learning Center School.
My name is Sydney, and I volunteered at Chautauqua during high school, and now I work at Chautauqua.
My name is Logan Flynn. I am a Bay High School teacher and also ACE instructor.
And sometimes a Chautauqua teacher. And I'm a Chautauqua teacher. My name is Cynthia McCall. Anyways, this is our group. I don't know if we want to introduce ourselves more. Here we go.
She's also the director of the school. It's her brainchild. And, I'm Melissa Krabner-Reagan, I forgot. I teach part-time at a university, and I volunteer for Chautauqua. And as I said before, I work as a parent mentor. It seems like a lot of time because, as you said, parents have a lot to say.
Okay, so today we're going to share our school's approach to inclusion through various partnerships and also gather your ideas and feedbacks about promoting diversity and inclusion in your areas.
So today we're going to talk about our 2 programs at Chautauqua.
So first, we're a transition school, and our students are 18 to 22 years old, and they have disabilities, but they also have an IEP, an individual education plan or program. And we're a free public charter school through our local school district. And we also partner with, Sydney said she came to Chautauqua and was a mentor through Bay High School, and now she works with us. But we have a lot of mentors that come every day, and Ms. Palfrey will speak about that later. But they're a big part of our school. And then Chris is going to talk about our adult program.
So our second program is our adult program, which is the program after you age out of our student program, and it starts at ages 22 and older, and it is a free self-sustaining program, which was initially our AmeriCorps Vista program. So it's we basically create a space for our students to come after 22 to continue to volunteer within our community and give back.
And also Carissa started out as a AmeriCorps volunteer, her first job at Chicago. So sort of like once you get there, you never leave.
Sort of never leave, that's right. And I think what the adult program speaks to is what you're saying. I'm sort of going to throw this in, that the ACE program that Chris will speak of, these are part of the Cambridge program. They helped start the adult program because when they turned 22, there was nothing, and there is nothing. And everybody had worked too hard to educate them for them just to go home to nothing. And so the kids started this program where even after they're 22, they could keep coming and giving service until they did maybe finally land some sort of and it's something anybody can do. You need to keep that in mind, that AmeriCorps can provide those services. And Chris is she came and helped develop it. I was going to speak about the education plan that sort of works its way into service learning, which is what we want to speak of. Every student who attends Chautauqua, the U.S., everybody in special education has an individual education plan. And ours are transition plans. They have services written in to help them move from the services they got in the school system into what they're going to need to survive in life as an adult. Each IEP is written on the 5 domains of the IEP, and I don't know much, maybe you all would know if every state is different, but in Florida there are 5 domains, and it's curriculum and learning, independent functioning, social emotional skills, health, and communications. And these IEPs are written very tailored to the student's needs, but they're also written to incorporate service learning. So they learn the skills they need for life by giving to others, and often in relationship with a peer mentor who will help them do it, depending on their level of need. We can stop for a minute. We had one very autistic young man who had an ACE mentor. When he first came to our school, I wasn't sure we were going to make it. He was so violent, throwing lamps. And if you worked with, and everything else, he could get his hands on. But if you worked with autistic children, it was a surprise to me to realize the common thing for him is we had one mentor who was giant and strong. Highland Game winners could throw the telephone poles or whatever it took, and the young man calmed down, was able to learn, and he was the doorway from which we were able to help him learn. And now he's actually fine without his mentor. But it is a good approach. The service learning, I think, is a good approach, and the mentors that help make it happen. But these are the domains of the IEPs that we write, and they're fulfilled through service to others in the community. And I don't know, Melissa, if you want to speak on service learning.
Yeah, so the curricular approach that Chautauqua uses is service learning, where you go out into the community and participate, as well as interactive. The goal of service learning is to specifically target all of those 5 domains that she just mentioned. And it's through various activities that students meet their goals. Service learning is great because it is collaborative, you're in a community, and it ends up being reciprocal, right? The community's gaining something from service, and the students are meeting their IEP goals through service. So to give you examples of that, this group is going to share a little bit. You guys want the microphone? They're going to share a little bit about what they do. So Sydney's going to share as a mentor, and Eloise as a travel mentor, and Nora as a travel mentor, and Haley, James, and Cadence as students, and they'll tell you what they do for their service learning experience.
So I think we're gonna start with Haley's gonna explain how she helps at a local school.
So I help with pre-K students at Cedar Grove Elementary School, Panama City, Florida. Like I help with them learning letters, numbers, ABCs. I also take lunch to the classroom and I help set that out. I also help put them to sleep during nap time. And I'm also one-on-one with one of the students. And then I also help clean during that time. Yeah.
Okay.
You want to tell about the school you help with?
Yeah. So I work at Patterson Elementary School in Panama City, Florida, with an autistic class. And there is a kid in there who needs extra help and everything. And I help him. I'm like his little I would say little, but I'm his older one-on-one. And I help him with everything, like I help him with his letters, numbers, and everything. Everything what a kindergarten through 2nd grade class does. And yeah, it's a fun experience. And I also help with the cafeteria at Patterson.
In this, what I say,
Yep, that's it. Tell them about Bayhawk Cafeteria.
I just gonna they have cafeteria.
Or even this summer for camp, what did you do?
Oh, clean. I just clean at the Bay High School with Miss Sally. Like wiping tables, vacuum.
Do they call you Mr. Vacuum?
Yes.
And what do you do with the lunches that are left over?
For away. Oh, no. No, what I'm just saying. Saving it for donation.
So if there's extra lunches from the school, you work to save them and give them to whom? Who do you give them to?
The poor people.
Okay.
On homeless.
Okay.
Sorry.
Does Cadence work? Who gives food tokens out? I thought Cadence was going to talk about that too.
Sure.
So at our school, it is one of the schools where homeless people like to come and get whatever they need, and Chautauqua is like the best bet on it. We give them trolley tokens to go around on the trolley and go places. And we give them the fruits that we donate from the cafeteria, and we also call them customers because it's nicer that way. And we give them peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. the caps make them at our school. What are they called?
They don't program.
The adult program at our school, like the older adult program. And yeah, it's amazing and it makes us all feel good.
I was thinking, then we could talk about the free yard sales too.
Oh, yes.
Do
We are
you want to say something?
Tell us about the yard sale.
You do it.
They have so much they want to tell you about what they do, because they do a lot.
Well, I was also going to talk about the free yard sale, which a lot of people in the area donate, like furniture, clothes, like there was a piano, there was a dishwasher, there TVs, I mean, we had a full classroom full of stuff that people donated, and we have a free yard sale for anybody who needs, like the homeless if they need clothes, students at our local high school if they need clothes, anybody could come and just get what they needed that we had. But we also we work with a neighboring high school to set up a prom dress shop. And I don't know if anyone knows what prom is, but it's a formal dance at the high school that the students bring their old dresses and donate them to those who can't afford them, and our students help set up like a shop in Mr. Flint's classroom, so they can come and get the same experience as if they were in the store getting their prom dress. But I think do you want to explain?
No, I definitely can. So what this prom pop-up shop is, it's as if they went into a retail store, except this has tons more services that the students can have, whether it be, of course, their dresses, their shoes, nails, hair, boutonnieres, corsages, things such as that. It's really, really just an experience that makes them feel that they're not any different than anyone else, and we even had, it's for anybody. Even if you can afford a $600 dress, which this is the story this is about, ended up, that could spend that, but ended up finding a dress at the pop-up shop and ended up getting that dress instead. So, it's open for anybody. It's just a great experience and a great thing to put on for the school and the community. So much so that the other schools were wanting this as well. So not only did it start at the high school that we work at, and also our mentors, but it's also for local high schools that we'll put this on for as well.
And Chautauqua students are the ones that run it. So.
And Chicago students are the one that run it.
Another thing that we love to incorporate is using the trolley system in our area. That's part of the final examination that the students take. They have to know how to use the trolley, get their own tokens and everything, so they can be able to go places. And we want to keep the trolley going. We want to keep people using it and spread the word that you can keep using it. Another thing I think Nora was going to share was about the Babylon book, how we give it to people.
Yes, so my sister and I, we live in Germany, and we went around giving out to some of the Syrian refugee children in our town. Some of the Babylon books, and we also as well donated them to some of the ones that we weren't able to hand out completely to our local what's it called, library. And so it's really nice because even though it was a few years ago, when you go in there, we still see them in there sometimes, and it's quite nice.
Well, we have a lot of partnerships like our students talked about, and we have a lot of big and small projects that we work on. throughout the year and over the years since Chautauqua started. And one thing that we've come to realize is when we go to make these connections around our community, we don't go looking for something, we go to see what we can do to help them. And we're usually the first call for our school district. If they need something, they know they can call Chautauqua and say, can you come fill these folders up for whatever job fair we have, or we've set up several job fairs for our community because back in 2018, yeah, we had a hurricane that just completely wiped out our town and the surrounding areas. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, and it was just hit after hit for our community. And so we lost a lot of people who had different jobs. And so the school district was looking for people to come in and be custodians and maids and things like that. And so our students were able to go in and fill that need. And then because of that, our students could learn work skills and jobs and other job skills that they need, and just daily living skills, but also make that connection within the community and build relationships. And they don't do it just because they have to, they do it because they want to, and our students love it. And all of the other students at the elementary schools and middle schools and high schools love to see our students. And I know around town, especially with me, if someone asks where I work and I say Chautauqua, they're like, you have the best job in the world. I'm like, I do. I have the best job. I cannot ask for a better one. And we go out, we have our community projects a lot, like the tokens and our prom dress shop and going in the community, and we even will hand out, we'll leave water bottles at our trolley stops, and we'll make fans. This summer we've had a hot summer in Panama City, and so we've made fans all summer long, and we'll leave them there, and for the people who use the trolley system, or even ourselves. But we also go out into the world and we travel like we are now, and we've set up for different conferences and brought different things over for the ISE, the International Association of Special Education.
It's another international special education.
Yes, and so we took routers over to Africa, to Tanzania, so they could set up their conference, and we brought over different like name tags and lanyards and things. But we've done beach cleanups all over.
But I think you should tell about working in orphanages so that
Yes.
the staff.
So we went and visited the orphanages in some of the different schools while we were there, while the teachers could go and attend the conference. And that was really nice to be able to do that for them. And so that they could learn something. We helped set it up, and we were able just to give back to them so they could give back better to their students. That was great. And I don't know, one thing, I think one thing we do a lot at Chautauqua, especially with service learning, is we try to find a need and then meet it the best that we can. And even if it takes a couple of days or one day or a couple of months, that's all right. And we've done our free yard sale, and then we have partnered with different churches to do pop-up pantries, and we served how many pounds of food? 50,000 pounds of food. And when we were all together, when we were all together giving out the different food, you could not tell who was a Chautauqua student, who was a Bayhigh student, or who was just in the community to come get anything or come help us. And that was really awesome. That it was just very inclusive, and that's what we strive for the most, is to be inclusive. And I think next is Ms. Walker.
I think we should come to Australia.
Me too. Me too.
That's why we haven't been served, but we've been So you've heard a lot about the mentors, and I want to explain that side of it because that's my part of what we do. We have a couple of programs for advanced students. One, how many of you have heard of AS and A-level examinations? That's the follow-on to IGSE that they were talking about today. And so our students, we have the honors students, utilize that examination system to earn their ACE diploma, which is the Advanced International Certificate of Education diploma. The other thing that we have is dual enrollment at our high school. And what dual enrollment is a student's ability to be on our campus, earn college credit from our local college, utilizing the curriculum, the testing, and the teachers who are certified to deliver that study. So those are two ways. These students that are in the ACE program are usually taking an enormous amount of high-level math, science, English, history. And so they're also looking, to be able to have a break to enjoy, a course. And what they will do is they will dual enroll in a co-op class, either an education or social work co-op class with Chautauqua. They will go daily down to Chautauqua, which is about a block away from our school, half a block maybe. And they'll spend one or two periods a day down at Chautauqua working with the students or mentoring. They're called mentors down there. So they get very involved with what the students are doing. And it's not a, teacher versus student. It is a partnership that they developed with the students down there, as Ms. McCauley talked about earlier, the one gentleman, but that is just one story of hundreds of stories of these students and how involved they are in the parties that they do with the kids and the activities and the relationship that they had during COVID. All of our mentor students wrote letters to all the Chautauqua students and we mailed them to their homes so that they could keep that contact with the students, which is very important. So we provide, by doing this, by utilizing the ACE students and this dual enroll opportunity, we're providing a real genuine inclusive experience. So it's hard to say when we talk about this genuine inclusive experience, who's learning the most? Or is it the Chautauqua students that are there that are learning, or is it our students? Because we know that when our students leave and go on to college, they're the ones that are going to be making the laws, making the papers, that affect the students that they have worked with. So we want them to be able to understand and know the value of every student.
Consider for Logan.
Oh.
You might not need it.
No, I don't
Can we
need
skip
it.
a You don't need it.
So it's really to ask the questions of, how can the Chautauqua Bay High School relationship be developed or start in your communities? There are ACE programs all over the world. We're definitely blessed that we have one in Panama City. But this can be reflected, or generalized through other places all over the world. You have to ask yourself a couple of questions though, do you or does your school, your organization utilize the community to build these relationships? Instead of, it was touched on before, going into the community, expecting them to give something back to you. How do you approach them and say, we have something very valuable for you that can free up all kinds of, whether it's monetary things or just time to where their employees can do something else. So what are those barriers? What can be done to help those? What can we do to answer questions that may be able to help you build these relationships in the community, to start this inclusion, reverse inclusion, any of these things? Those are the questions. And that's the reason why we're here today, is because we've done this, it works. Does it take work to get these things started? 100% it does. But the rewards from that hard work are just amazing and plentiful. Any questions about anything?
Yeah, it's a question. How is your program funded?
Well, I can answer that. Florida, every state has a funding program, and ours is called the FEFP, Florida Education Funding Program. And they set aside money per student, so every student gets one full FTE. Then on top of that, students that have disabilities, if you're several different things, they then add the money on top of that so that they can provide the funding needed for the program. And so it's funded because it is a charter school. The charter is written through the district. They get the funding for those students.
Right, and it's, we we have if you're interested in how we travel, and we do travel all the time. We've been to all 7 continents, and we go to 7 continents inclusively to meet our natural allies.
And it's free to everybody.
And nobody's allowed to pay to go with us, because our students, I want ours to be sort of power brokers, the disabled student fix them. But it's just that we operate in a very tiny space. We just have a little house, we use all these free spaces. You heard where they go? We don't pay for the water at the elementary school, or the toilets flushing, or anything. It's use of space, and they would utilize the funds that we're not spending on some big facility, which for most special needs is 20 to 30%. We use the community.
Also in the Florida for the mentors, in the Florida our FEFP, students that pass the ACE exams earn money. So there is funding for those students, and that helps fund our students, but it gives them the opportunity to go over and take care of some of the paraprofessional type skills and activities that need to be done for Chautauqua.
And then, I don't know if there are ACE programs where you are, or IB programs, but if they have the 2-year degree, they meet the technical requirement of a para, even though it's a volunteer para. So we have all these little things lined up to say, so that we can do things like this. But I wanted to add one other thing, which you're talking about with parents. I think it can't be overstated how much even the teachers have asked me at elementary schools, what happens to these kids? They never see them as seniors or juniors. They don't know what they become. And it means so much to the parents to know that, I'm not going to call names at point, but some of them did have major behaviors or major challenges that are sitting at the end of this table right now. And there is hope, and that's what the parents need to know. That there is hope.
And I think the building relationships, not only with the mentors, with the students, it's also, and not so much the mentors with the parents, but it's with the adults like us here at the table that stay involved with these parents to help them navigate this unfortunate, tricky path that they have to navigate. So it's a wonderful relationship, both with the mentors to the students and the staff to the parents as well.
And another example of why I think it's so important, if you can, just really quick, is the graduates. They're back in the community. If I need a tooth pulled, I've got a former ACE person that's now a dentist. If I need a public defender or something, we have this, so it works out that way. That's wonderful.
Right. We should talk more. Yeah, I would like to have you. Yeah, your program. I'd love to have people come to Earth.
All right.
We'll be there tomorrow. Can you let us get our clothes done?
Forget London, we're fine.
Thank you so much for coming. As said before, diversity is a fact and inclusion is an act until inclusion becomes a fact. So, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
So we are starting, and that's what we're presenting on tomorrow, we're starting a school for children with autism. And the service learning hour for our secondary students, that's exactly what the kind of curriculum we gave to the service.
Thank you.
It's been 10
years, but
you utilize I know you know who was English exams, because I have been at Cambridge with several people from Australia for several meetings. So I know that they utilize those, so they have the model that we have at our high school. You're building the model that they have at their school. So you can start out with those two models knowing that they can do this wonderful thing. I mean, it would be a benefit for all.
A lot of our students, what we're really targeting are the students who have the intellectual capability to do fine in school, but it's the behaviors that get in the way. You know, we have I've got a little 3-minute video that I'll show you one of our students, and I have permission to show this. But he is absolutely, and he told me, yeah, he got upset with one day that was all he wanted to have. And he says, you don't understand. He says, I've been identified as gifted. I am advanced. I said, oh, I get it for sure. It's just, but this is, he's gotten to the point, they have so many kids like this, that he was a brother's kid who just completely refused to go to school because he'd been bullied so bad. Yeah, and this is the first, and that's why I started this video, this is the first safe space that we have had as our
You are, I'm starting out, so I was just having her kind of. What goes on where you at now, and I just feel like all Carrie signed me an hour email, and she suggests that you guys share your presentation from your
This is,
laptop.
we had, well, Vicki Spencer was one of her and one of her colleagues, they brought a group of postgraduate students to her for their well, so they visited basis, so I don't know, right now, we're not a school yet. Like my students, and so we asked the kid's mom if she could talk about what it meant. Sure. And then I said, would you tell me, what fixes? And he says, sure. And just the fact that he was willing to do that, because when he first came to us, we had like a sand pit on the playground, and he would just sift sand for the whole time. The first goal was just getting out into the sand.
It's not the same as this.
Yeah.
Brian, Cindy, and Jasmine, and everyone are really cool, and I love how understanding them. The activities are so fun. I love science, and it's my favorite thing in life. To learn about. I love STEM and playing chess with random stuff. Some of the things we have learned about is plants, spice, and astrophysics. And human biology is my favorite. We have investigated specimens under the microscope and learned about animals with urine tape. First, Martina, hydrogen, helium, brilliant, nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, neon, sodium, magnesium, aluminum, and silicon. Science is so interesting. It has helped me make friends who are similar to me, and it is so good having friends who like the same kind of things. Every time I go, I have the best time, and there are no downsides. Everyone is so nice and supportive, and I think they like me enough to love them. I love bases so much, and I can't wait for the school to open. So every day is the best day.
Exactly. Business on the Sydney. I need to go on Australia. I must go there.
You said chances coming.
Yes, I know. Disney on his oldest movie. Hey, Mills,
Yes, I have.
Hey, Mills. But first, well,
All right. We got your name down.
But we have in Australia, there are, the unemployment rate for adults with autism is highest, it's even higher than just people with disabilities overall. You know, it is so high, and it's just ridiculous. People like this, who are sitting,
Who's talking about astrophysics and the chemical, table, the table of elements. I mean, goodness gracious.
so it's, I would love to.
Yes.
Absolutely, yes.
program, so I think they're probably fine, right?
Wait,
Right,
Cindy Smith, what is your email? That would be.
Just write it here, we'll share it, and then it'll pop here.
Yeah, because
So we're always ready to go, right?
Yes, ma'am.
First University. You all did a beautiful
I think it was
job.
Cindy dot
Fantastic work.
Smith at Cindy dot Smith one. Okay, that's what I thought. Right, so I think with some of my guys, I do that business, but I'll try to.
Yeah. Actually, I do too, but.
It was wonderful to meet you and hear all about the work you guys are doing. It sounds amazing.
Wonderful, this is great.
Yes.
I'm excited.
Yeah, I volunteered at a school in Brooklyn, like 2 summers ago for 6 weeks, and they have students from like 5 years old up until 21, and I wanted specifically to work with the 18 to 21 to learn about their transition process. Oh my gosh, the things I learned, because it's a private school, and like how much they can empower parents to fight.
Oh, yeah.
Like every single school needs to do this.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for going back to that slide.
Yes.
Because
I think it's good. Great. It's on the screen, so.
That's always a good sign.
Yes. Just gonna leave, nice to look, see what it all. Thank you again so much.
Yeah.
This lady was done. Very successful.
You are, Ann?
Yes, I am, yes.
I've heard your name, in the best possible way.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're a member of choir?
I used to be.
Okay,
Yeah, I used to be on the committee,
yeah,
and I generally go to the forum every
yeah,
year.
yeah. Are you going this year?
I'm actually on long service, in second semester, so I'm not quite sure if I'll go.
Yeah.
I'm not going to present. I know we presented last year. I had a doctoral student who finished and she presented last year. So, yeah, no, it's a really lovely, it's a great opportunity to get together, especially locally, and see what's
Yeah.
It's amazing how the breadth of things that are going on.
I know.
Never found to be amazed at the different topics that people are interested in.
Yeah, it's been a great way for me to get to know.
Yes, I know, I've tried many times to try and reach out and religious schools. We don't get a lot of religion in schools. It tends to be just quite academic, but no, Western Wire as well.
Yeah. It's amazing that I'm in India.
To meet you. We're pretty busy those afternoons though, really, and they're generally, 70 or around about that in the bed, so it's actually a bit like this, it's quite hard to get to know.
Yeah.
And I was so bad. I was talking too much. It was the most wonderful thing. She was a good for
I had my graduation today, I got to go to the
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And I personally also have like a hiring foundation, and it helps with people, so that's a lot. It helps me and not only them, like just connect. And
she's a good just like it. But yeah, it just with the world from her to say it. And she skipped out of the groups that everybody else thought she belonged to come be with the group. Well, thank you for your shit.
Oh, absolutely.
You guys are ready to send it. Let us know.
Yes. I'll see you in Australia.
Absolutely.
We'll go find some kangaroos.
Like we do this thing where we try to be, there's 7 continents. And Australia and Africa are the ones that are.
There you go.
Sometimes I need to start like change different times. So after lunch, we go. I just did this. To check for me. No, I don't want to do that. I don't do that either.
Sorry, tell me about it afterwards. So Krista, if you want to go to the transition program, which is by the way. It's long or something, but I would go
I mean, look, occasionally, yes. Yeah. I think someone's doing very long something. Yes. Hello.
Hi. They have more water.
They must do. That one's dead. Is that one full then?
That, no, that was.
Oh, yeah, there you go. You got one there. Oh. Yes, I've got a memory from that. Where are you from?
I'm from the University of Washington in Tacoma. It's about 30 minutes south of the Seattle.
Okay. I've been to the Seattle campus.
Yeah.
I used to have a colleague who lived there.
Oh, I have 3 kids there.
Oh, really?
Oh my goodness.
It's a nice campus.
The campus is unbelievable. It's just,
I can't remember her last name.
and are you the presenters for this?
The first up, yes.
I am just so hopeful that my flash drive, everything works.
Isn't that the constant worry when you come, anyway, when you're requiring something from.
Well, and I didn't bring my computer because we traveled first for 2 weeks. And I didn't want to travel with the computer, so I brought my iPad and it's been useless and my phone's been better, so. But I can't do any work, it's just,
No.
yeah.
No, I didn't bring my laptop, but they charge us, so I've just got one. Yeah. You had a few connections just when I arrived, but that's been sorted.
Right.
It's so amazing how cut off you can feel when technology doesn't.
I know, and I was gonna bring my computer and then the day we were leaving, I thought, you know what, I am not gonna make any more changes. No, I'm just gonna go with what I have.
Well, it's weight too to carry.
Yeah.
That's so
Vanessa,
Yeah.
are you excited when you go back?
Yes. When I started libraries.
I need to by going to the highland.
The Highland Shop?
On the other way, behind the museums. Check it out, okay. So, pay attention.
Hey.
Hi.
Yes. Nice meeting you. You guys had such a good presentation. I like want to come visit you.
Oh, they love it. The director, she loves it. Yeah, she has a big house. Actually, my mom, she has a big house. She loves it.
She's your mom?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I grandmother.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
She ropes everybody in for everything.
Oh, that's
I'd rather just hear that they have all help in someone.
Yeah. Oh, and also you go through all those things to you.
Right. Well, anyway, you should definitely come visit.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in New York, so I'm much closer than Australia.
Awesome. And it's funny, we were talking about the research method too.
Yeah.
It's the mind, it's shifting your mind for the Lincoln and Gooba and yellow stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what department are you in?
I'm within the School of Education, but I teach for both special education to prepare teachers and graduate programs. And then I also prepare school psychologists.
Okay.
So yeah, how about you?
I am in special and inclusive education department in my university.
Yeah, I've been there.
Oh no, I've got one as well.
Yeah.
And yes, I teach that pre-service and coding and graduate.
Okay, yeah. Okay, a lot of overlap.
Yes. So yeah, it's interesting. So for a long time now, I've been doing here.
And
I've got some deals now.
yeah, and we don't really have a department, especially, so
We
I was the special ed coordinator.
Yeah, I'm coordinator.
Yeah. So,
We don't technically have a department.
yeah, yeah,
We're too small for that.
Yeah.
That's all right.
yeah.
Sorry.
But they were all the same. Yeah.
The South. South India.
But
Coffee speaks.
Or we just buy the coffee board, but they still don't put all the coffee ground there. To regulate it, I think, so, yeah.
Guys, it is 12 o'clock and we're going to start, otherwise things will get out of sync really quickly. So welcome to our presentation. Today we're talking about supporting students with disability in the transition to middle school. So students who are coming in from elementary or primary school into the middle school setting. And I'm in the I'm coordinator of special and inclusive education, and my lovely colleague.
I'm Anne, and I'm more a middle years person. I taught high school in my teaching career, and so middle years, those teenagers, the 10 to 15-year-olds are my passion.
So we sort of gel really nicely together.
Yes, that's how the research came about.
First thing we want to do on your desk there, and maybe the ones at that, we want you to think about a time when you transitioned. And this might be into a new job. It could be moving house. You know, when did you transition?
Moving country.
Yeah, moving countries, all sorts of things. And on each of the post-it notes, or on as many post-it notes as you want, write down what are the feelings, and it could be a worry or a concern that you experienced when you moved. It could be a transition from.
What were you worried about before you actually had to get into the transition, into that process of moving? What were your concerns? What were the challenges you thought you might face? What were you looking forward to? just if you can think about the last time you had to make a big change in your life. Try and write as many different concerns, challenges, things on one post-it note.
When you think you've got some down, I want you to share with the person next to you and just see if you have similar or different experiences, worries, concerns.
Maybe a group of three, just next to you, just chat to someone. You might want to get up and move.
Whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I know, right? It's great to know people that I work with, people that I work with, didn't know anything. So just making new friends, learning what are the local laws. Well, that's something that works. Yeah, absolutely.
Someone took a like on the team. Did you? Okay, so at least you can fill it up. That's fine. But that's very common. Okay.
Maybe one more minute.
One more minute.
High school to the transition school, he's at what were you saying you're worried about? Yeah, what kind of job you might have, what sort of things you're worried about. Yeah, so that's what.
Okay.
That was a quick minute.
Yep, very quick minute, 30 seconds. Who would like to share one thing that they were worried or concerned about?
I was worried about making new friends.
Okay.
Try to the country.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, so.
I've seen how looking for jobs, like we need jobs,
Yeah, so finding a new job. Okay, fantastic.
I felt in the transition, whenever I had to do something new, the big fear is how can I change to meet the situation? The change was the thing that I had to do myself, then asking everybody else to change and what should I do?
Fantastic. But we might stop you there. We've got some similar ones, felt scary, didn't know the new role, making friends, all of those types of things. And what we have found is that children moving from primary or elementary to middle schooling, secondary schooling, have exactly the same concerns.
And it doesn't matter where this happens, what country, it's the same sort of concerns that young people have. And they mirror your concerns as, when you're looking at that issue from an adult perspective.
Yeah. So we asked a whole heap of students with and without disabilities what their concerns were. And these are just some of the initial concerns about moving. So I just want to show you a quick video. Go on. There we go. Oh, it's not going to show.
We were so confident that
We're
the
so
technology
confident.
would work.
It's not going to. It's not going to. So anyway, you can see here, our first little girl here, she talked about primary school, knowing all, she didn't want to leave primary school. She knew all her teachers, she knew, what the classroom, she knew the layout, everybody knew her. She didn't want to leave primary school. She was really worried about going into a secondary setting. And this little guy said he was nervous, but also at the same time excited. And excited to meet new people, make new friends. So,
So when we talk about a transition, we're actually talking about a process rather than an event. So it's a state of moving from one situation to another. And so we have time to have thoughts about what that present state might be. And sometimes those thoughts bring up a whole lot of worries for us. And then there are our experiences during that transition and post-transition. And so for young people who are also going through a major transition from being a child to an adult, when we ask them to then make an additional change from moving from a very familiar environment to an unfamiliar environment, there are many, many concerns and things that raise. And it doesn't matter whether the child has some type of additional need, most children will worry about the same sorts of things. So some will worry about the fact that they are the only person from their cohort in the primary school who is going to that particular high school. In Australia and Western Australia, parents quite often make deliberate choices about which school they want their child to go for high school. So they don't necessarily go to the one that's just down the road. So they may be making that transition on their own. In a primary school campus, and I'm talking very much about our local context, they are generally in one classroom with the same teacher all day. All their belongings are there. They know one teacher's rules and expectations. They know the layout. They know how the operation of the classroom works. Typically, when they go into a high school, that changes, and they may have to deal with seven teachers in a day. They may have a team of ed support assistants who may help them. They may not have the one person with them all the time. So they have to get to know a lot of different teachers' expectations, different rules. They have to carry their equipment with them. They have to be organised to know what equipment to bring with them to school on the right day. They have to know to bring which homework is due when. So there are multiple different changes, which makes it a really major shift from one environment to another.
And one thing we did find was that the experiences were described by all students the same, but they were magnified for students with disabilities. And part of the reason for that is, poor organisation. If I've got ADHD, I'm going to struggle with organisational components. So therefore, I'm going to struggle finding my way around the school. So we know that the same concerns are evident, but they're magnified.
So if we know that these are the concerns, then what can we do? And so Diane and I, when we were talking, we were trying to think about sort of accommodations that could be made that could assist everyone. Because remember that for the young adolescent going through puberty, there's major changes going on in the brain, and a lot of that is happening in the prefrontal cortex, which is really the logic, decision making. I can make sensible decisions and I can be logical and organised, and that sort of is closed for construction during early adolescence. So they don't necessarily, all children, not necessarily have the same resources to call upon to make decisions, which can sort of magnify the change. It's important to note that many children with and without disabilities make the change very smoothly. They don't experience a lot of trouble, but some experience significant almost trauma from the experience, and their trajectory through high school is forever impacted. So it's really important that we actually understand what the children are facing and understand that it's not the moment that they arrive at the high school that transition begins. It's what can we do back in primary school beforehand to get them ready to help them smooth that transition. And also, transition doesn't start at the end of the first week. Well, they're here now. That's it. It's an actual process that lasts for quite some time, and children will experience that process differently, and it will last different lengths of time for different children. So it's about looking at it from the lens of what are the things we can do that can help everyone and provide the resources for children to access when they need them.
And a really solid transition program can make a difference between a student being very successful and a student really struggling with schooling. So we know that that's an important component. Transition programs generally address that mismatch between what the young adolescents need and their typical high school environment. So we know the high school environment is very much on your own. You have to navigate your own way around. You have to do homework that might be more significant than previously. So there's a lot of things that will mismatch between what the adolescents feel they should be able to do. And of course, developing a developmentally responsive school environment means that we need to consider a range of things such as personalisation. How do we make sure each individual feels that they belong? That they're competent, that they've got the skills to actually do what they need to do, that they can develop friendships, relatedness, and that they have some autonomy, decision-making processes, but also feel that they have a sense of care as well. Okay.
Yeah, so when we're talking about children with some sort of disability, going to an environment where they don't work so much larger environment, it's a bigger campus, there are multiple challenges in getting from one place to another. It's really important that they have a go-to person, that they have a person who they feel is looking out for them. And really, from the research that I've done looking at transition across, all the high school population, having a go-to person is really, really critical. And selecting the right go-to person is absolutely hyper-critical for both parents and the students, so that the high school can be a place where they can belong and become the people that they are, draw on all of their potential. Student voice is really, really important. We never stop and ask the children how they're going. What's working, what's not working. Sometimes it's almost like you're relying on your intuition to know that that child's struggling with that. So making sure that we listen to the voices of all children and ask them, how are you settling in? What could we do better? Is very, very important, because it's their feedback that's really critical in actually evaluating how a transition program has gone, so we can make some changes for following years, so we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. So the more we can honour the voice of the student, the more we can help them feel that this is a place they belong and can become.
So when we asked the students, these were the main concerns or worries that they noted. So making new friends was a big one. That social element was something that they really stressed a lot. If they didn't make new friends or they were socially insecure in what they were doing, that was a big barrier for them. Getting lost in the school, knowing your way around, that was also a really large concern, and particularly for our students with disabilities. In fact, somebody told a story once of a boy who had ADHD. He was very disorganised, and for some reason he missed every Wednesday afternoon at school. And they did some investigation. He was about to be thrown out because he missed too much school. And it turned out that he just couldn't find the room. So he then just went home. Okay, so stuff like that can be really
And no one checked in.
No one checked in.
Happening.
Okay. So something simple, which could have been addressed, wasn't addressed. Things like arriving late to class, having different teachers.
Students have very, very different expectations of high school teachers. They tend to think of them as ogres and mean and nasty.
Yeah. And things like having a range of different teachers, getting to know what each teacher's different expectations are. We know we have different expectations. We do it as university lecturers. So how are people actually adjusting to that? Having too much homework was also a really big concern, and they were unsure how they were going to cope with that. And things like remembering timetable, knowing where they need to be at what time. So that's what students told us. Parents also had worries.
Yeah. So part of the research was also because parents are particularly important players. The more parents understand what's going to happen, the more they can, the better their understanding is, the more they can alleviate the concerns of their children. So they're a really big player and an often overlooked player for secondary schools. In primary school, they'll have access to their child's teachers pretty much every day. They're often standing outside the classroom to collect the child at the end of the day. So they have ready access. In secondary school, the children don't want to be seen in the same postcode as their parents, so they tend not to want the parent to come onto the school ground, but they're also dealing with multiple parents. And of most concern to parents, they want to meet the teachers. They just want to connect with who that person is and make that content. So parents, we need to ask them too and make sure that we include them, because they're very, very key players. They have concerns about their children. First was the fact that they know their children are going to be on campuses now where they're going to see 17 and 18-year-olds, and they're really worried about the behaviour that their children might see, so they have concerns about that. They worry about coping academically. Again, it may be some of the myths about secondary school or high school, but they were really concerned that their children weren't going to cope with the work. They were concerned about their children fitting in. Some children are travelling inordinate distances to get to a high school. I remember interviewing one young girl. She was about this tall. She was so tiny. I She was really tiny. And she was travelling about 50 kilometres catching buses and trains to get to her school. And even knowing the bus timetables, that was really hard for parents to access that information from the school. So those, children want to become responsible and independent, but at the same time, their parents were doubting their capacity to do so.
And the parents actually, they pass that on to the child too.
Yes,
so if they're concerned and worried, that also gets passed along.
Yeah. Needing to let go, they understand, with many of us are parents in the room, I've no doubt, we never quite know where to let those aching strings go and let the children cope on their own. But that concern about when do I step in and when do I sort of stand back was a concern for them. Establishing a relationship with new support staff, particularly for children with disabilities, they've got to know that person really well. And it's a really sad indictment, certainly on our system, that support person can't come with them to the secondary school, but it becomes a whole different funding game. And so the whole notion of establishing that link, not only with the teachers with whom their children are going to interact, but that support person who may be that confidant that they have access to. And mixing with older students, that potential for bullying, that was a concern for them as well.
Good. So there's 4 main elements that you need to consider if you're looking at strategies for transition programming. And one that comes up first and foremost, and really should be always our first and foremost, is that building of relationships. Knowing the student, knowing what their concerns are, being able to address those concerns through relationship building. And also assisting students to build their own relationships with other students too. So those social skill interactions that we need to make sure are strengthened.
Particularly given the concern that children have about fitting in and making new friends.
Yeah. That was their main thing. Communication goes both ways, so communication with children and the parents as well. So making sure that you're really clearly stating up front, way before they get to school, what are the expectations? What would you bring on the first day? All of those types of things, parents need to know that too. But so do the students, because it helps them to feel ready and comfortable in what they're doing.
Yeah, I'll just note too that some of the parents are first-time secondary parents. It's okay if they've had other previous children go through the secondary school. They know sort of how things work, but for those first-time secondary parents, communication is important. Planning, I'm sure when you think about, hark back to what you were thinking about in your transition, you did some planning. You sort of thought about, things that you might do, things you wouldn't do, and as you, did some evaluation along the way. Well, transition programs don't just happen. They need to be planned, and they need to be planned quite intentionally, and ideally, they will be planned with the primary school or primary schools from which the children are coming. And planning also involves monitoring and evaluation. So making sure that we're checking in with parents, with teachers, particularly the children who are coming into year 7 or whatever the intake year is in your context. But teachers are really important, seeing how things are going, and the students. So that evaluation, what we often find too is that at the end of term, our first term, or the first semester, depending on your context, we often assume that's it, it's done and dusted. But with the research that we've done has generally shown that children need to sort of be having another sort of step back and start again when they come back from first term holidays, because they've forgotten so much over, it's only 2 weeks, but young people's brains do go in other directions. And so thinking about what is it we now need to go back and just reinforce again to ensure that, the children can get off to a smooth start in their second term.
Particularly with students with intellectual disability, we know that loss, the summer loss happens, but it also happens over that 2-week or the breaks between terms and semesters as well. So that's definitely something we need to continue to do. So one thing that Anne and I have done, and we've got an article on this, is looking at incorporating universal design for learning in transition programs. So rather than having a transition program for every student and then a transition program for students with disabilities or additional needs, we're looking at making sure it's universally designed. So we've looked at it in 3 ways. The first one is pre-transition. So before transition happens, what can we do? What are some strategies that we would use? So you can see here we've got some ideas, and we've left spaces because I'm sure that you guys have got plenty more ideas to go in there too. So things like mimicking the high school timetable during the last term of primary school, so that they get a more nuanced appreciation of what's expected. Things like providing induction days in a variety of modes, verbal, different languages, could be sign language, it could be where they do role play. I mean, it could be a wide variety of different things. And, what to bring on the first day. We found that was a major issue for a lot of parents and students as well. With action and expression, having older students visit the school, providing cue cards for students to reduce anxiety. So you might have a little cue card with, a little map on it, or various things that you can do with students as well. And tours. So get students to tour the school. They might use a phone or an iPad, record their little tour as they go around. Okay? And then, of course, engagement. Choice of activities in a school. So when you go on your school visit, you might have a choice of fun activities to do. It could be jewellery making or all sorts of different things in a school setting. And then introducing each other. But also introducing scenarios and letting them know that they're not the only students to have gone through those experiences. So, yes, we've got students getting lost. What do we do? Here's a scenario. And this has happened to this student, this student, this student. So giving them that information.
This really focuses on relationship building. This is the start of the relationship that the secondary school will have with those incoming year sevens or whatever you want to. So this is very much centred about building relationships. And if relationships get off to a good start, then you generally sort of feel that you're building well for success.
And in here too, I would also put strategies for developing friendships. How do you do that? And that everybody needs that, not just students with disabilities. A lot of other students struggle in that area too.
And Diane and I developed, these are just suggestions, and you'd probably have many, many more. But these were based on feedback from the students about what had worked and what hadn't worked. So the children were telling us these things work really well for them, and this would help. So this is sort of the basis, and that's why that student voice is really, really important, and also parent voice. The parents were also telling us these are things that really helped. This could have been done better.
Yeah, so during that initial transition process, things like, how do you develop your own timetable, colour coding. My son's high school, when they first went into high school, year 7 was our secondary middle schooling, and everything was colour coded. So science was blue, English was yellow, so all of their subjects were colour coded, and they had different files for each subject. And it was to help them organise themselves into that structure. Okay? Things like, what do you actually put in the locker? What do you bring with you? All of those types of things. And use of multimedia resources on how to cope with that transition too. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but you can see that there's lots of different ways that we would support students while they were transitioning. So that first week, month, 6 months. Okay.
And these things will work for all students. And I think it's important that we question the students too, how they're going. I mean, I remember one teacher saying on one day, she said, right, stop everybody, get your pencil cases out, and I want you to empty everything you've got on the desk in front of you. And then she emptied her pencil case in front of her and said, right, put your pen, that goes back in, and then all the little pile of additional stuff. But it was recognising that children were really struggling with what to bring because they had to bring it. Firstly, it wasn't in the classroom there. And because they weren't sure quite what they would use, they would bring everything. So just starting, and I think this really typified the fact that the teacher had the good sense to say, I need to stop what I'm doing here. Let's put the curriculum to the side for a minute and let's get the children organised. And a number of the schools that I've done research in actually don't do any formal teaching of curriculum in the first 2 weeks. They focus on just helping the children get settled in, make new friends, meet the teachers, understand how the locker works. And that's where having like a good year coordinator or a go-to person who can stand around in the lockers and help the smallest children, the child who always gets the locker up the top, just access their things, locker keys. And it's only by recognising that during that transition, these are the things that we struggle with, and we just need to stop. Because time is spent here getting the children settled is going to save us a lot more time, and it's also just helping us to get to know the students.
I think the other one I just wanted to point out too was that sometimes we don't think about this.
No.
So we think about what happens in the classes, but that unstructured time is often the time that people struggle the most. So what do? Can we provide activities? Can we have something set up so that they've actually got support within those unstructured times, lunch, recess times? And we know that a lot of students really struggle in those times too. And of course, using peer mentors is also a part of this during transition
Peer
process.
support works really well.
Yeah, we know it does.
Because they tend to believe what slightly older children will tell them rather than what a teacher or a parent might tell them.
Okay.
It works very well.
And then of course, lastly, we looked at post-transition. So how long your post-transition process is, we also need to look at reminders after holidays. We need to revisit those things as well. So always coming back to make sure that student is comfortable. One of the things too, is getting feedback from all stakeholders. You know, what's working, what's not working, how can we support you better? That student voice element that we think is really powerful has to come out there as well.
I think feedback from teachers too, who are in the classrooms, and actually asking them, what are your children struggling with? Because sometimes it might just be in that environment, a science classroom with a science lab, or it might be a general issue across the cohort, but if you don't ask teachers, we're never going to know. So they're an important player.
We're out of time, so just to finish off, we have videos of this, but they won't work today. So basically, this little lovely girl said that the teachers made her feel happy. She was really worried about coming to high school. She's a really good girl, and she said that the teachers made her feel welcome and happy. And this little guy just says, just don't worry about it.
Yeah.
If you had to give a message to somebody coming into high school, he said, it's okay, it'll be fine, don't worry about it. So that was his main message.
I think it's amazing how many times in talking to the young students, they will say friendly and helpful teachers. The teachers went easy on us. How wonderful is that they recognise that these teachers are actually human after all and care about them, and that, they know them really well.
And just our reference list. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you get something out of it.
Thank you.
I'm keeping this to time.
While you're switching, I was just say I really appreciate that you do the self-determination. All your different perks have the autonomy and competency and relatedness. So I think that's great that you're really building that self-esteem and
I think that goes along with the early adolescent. That's building autonomy. That's
all of it's important.
It's all
really is important for all of us. But what you're saying they need to do helps them great, like your peer mentors, their community.
Yeah. I think the peer mentors was probably one of the most successful strategies that the children were telling us about. Because the young children were saying that they'll teach us about high school. They tell us about high school.
They give the lowdown.
Yeah, absolutely. And they tell them, they don't hide anything. So they're pretty truthful. She's really nice watching.
Yeah. Better do your homework.
Yeah.
Once again, no, not the street.
I can put this over here.
I feel
Okay.
There's no key until you finish your homework.
Thank you everybody for being here today. I want us to get started on time, but I also recognize we all have biological needs. If you need to take the restroom, you need to get tea, coffee, water, please feel free to take 2 minutes to do that. If you don't, we can go ahead and get started, but I want to recognize that because we're all human beings.
I also have the pleasure of speaking before lunch. Sometimes it's a disadvantage, sometimes it's not. My name is Britta Schwab. I'll be presenting today about a program looking at and addressing special education, law enforcement, and disability, and how those can intersect. I just want to thank you all for being here. I'll go ahead and just go through quickly introduction. I'm a student with Texas A&M. My research interests include mental health, disabilities, interagency collaboration, and law enforcement training. Before this work, I worked for about 10 years in the social services industry, working with individuals that had disabilities. And when I'm not as a student, I like to travel and do yoga and gardening. As we all know, being in the room, research has not gone alone. There are fantastic collaborators that are not able to be here today, but I do want to highlight them along with our community partners where research is taking place. My objectives today are to share a little bit about the research project we've been working on, to talk about research in the context of relationships, how we funded the research, and what's coming next for this project. So the background is, as you all likely know, people with disabilities are more likely to die during police encounters than individuals in any other population. These statistics reflect the United States. I recognize we're not in the United States right now, but we know globally individuals with disabilities are far more vulnerable and at risk when they are involved in a police or law enforcement interaction. We looked at how teachers and parents are preparing these students with disabilities, particularly students that may be in a setting with a school resource officer while they're experiencing their education, will then transition to a very different environment when they are no longer part of the school system. With the example, the school resource officer likely knows their name, likely knows what may be triggering for them, and likely knows what could be helpful for them. When they are in the community, a law enforcement officer will not likely have any of that information. And we also found during our research, law enforcement officers are not prepared either. We called our work Reverse Crisis Intervention, or RCIT. In the United States, there's a program called Crisis Intervention Training. This is a training for members of law enforcement to better understand how to work with individuals that have disabilities. But we weren't really interested in the law enforcement component, we were interested in the parents and teacher component. And so we conducted a survey to special education school teachers across the country. And our findings were that most do not discuss or prepare special education students for these interactions. They don't know how. They don't have the resources themselves to be able to do that. And then they do not feel prepared. Developed something called Handle with Care. This was a program actually that a local to Pennsylvania, local law enforcement organization embarked on as a registry for individuals with disabilities to register with the police department, to let those officers know things like their triggers, what they may look like if they are not, if they're being sought, for example, a person who may wander. And we also built in a component for the law enforcement officers themselves to receive specific training on how to safely interact with these populations, emphasizing things like de-escalation, partnerships with schools and community service agencies, and then as a component, wellness for the officers themselves. So we did some research and found that law enforcement officers overall tend to be a pretty unhealthy group of people. And we know that physical health impacts mental health, and that impacts your ability to successfully de-escalate a situation, for example. So we conducted some community surveys. These results are limited to a couple counties in Pennsylvania. I'm confident we would have different results if we had a broader survey base, so I do want to share that. Many of the individuals we had surveying with felt that local law enforcement officers treated them fairly. But again, I do think we would have very different results if we had a bigger sample. We also surveyed law enforcement officers at 2 departments to determine their feelings of comfort or their feelings of preparation for engaging with these populations. Then we went and worked with individuals themselves at a social service agency in Pennsylvania to hear their lived experiences engaging with law enforcement. So many of these individuals provided recommendations that I think apply very much in that transition phase from high school to community. Working with family members and loved ones, so individuals who know the person themselves the best and know what they're like when they're not experiencing a crisis. We encourage to have non-crisis meetings with law enforcement. At one local school district, this looks like the law enforcement officers bringing out some therapy dogs and being on site in the schools. So the officers themselves get exposure to youth in a positive way, and the youth themselves get exposure to law enforcement in a situation that's not a crisis. They're having a fun dog and getting to do some positive things together. And then, of course, partnerships between schools, community service agencies, and law enforcement. We found, and I'm sure this is not news to anyone here, often there is a breakdown when transition from high school to the community happens. And so what can be done to have those partnerships in place before they're needed? We had some recommendations that came out of the research for law enforcement. Again, probably nothing surprising to anyone here, but training needs to focus more on de-escalation and less on use of force. In general, minimizing the use of force and recognizing implicit bias in police interactions is a huge component to the training. And police officers need to understand the intersections of the populations that they are working with. From that lived experiences research, we gathered some quotes from individuals themselves, which I'm sharing with all of you, and probably in your work you've heard similar things if you've worked with people within these populations. As part of our training component, we wanted to empower individuals living with disabilities to be the trainers. So for a person such as myself, I'm far less effective than an individual who has experienced interactions with law enforcement and can share directly from their personal experience. So we work to empower those community members by partnering with social service agencies as well as a special education classroom to help them become prepared, to be comfortable to share their story, and to have a lot of courage, because it takes a lot of courage to sit across from a member of law enforcement and talk about how in the past you've experienced harm from a person within this work. Of course, the importance of creating a safe environment for everyone. So preparations for the individuals who were speaking, whether they were, a teacher, a staff person, or an individual with a disability. Getting continuous feedback, so hearing from all the stakeholders on the project, what was working and what wasn't, was very important. And the applications to an international context, I think, are that we have individuals in all of these sectors, right? So we have families, we have teachers, we have individuals with disabilities, and we have law enforcement. And so how can we bring these four groups together to best support individuals in our community? These are some of the local partners on the project that I worked on, and I want to highlight the importance of having diverse partners. So you'll see here social service agencies, some funders, along with some other law enforcement agencies. So what's coming next for this project? So we are building off of the Handle with Care program for a program called Uplift Us. This program specifically is bringing together individuals of color to have a moderated dialogue with law enforcement, maybe the individuals themselves or maybe their families, around training officers to increase empathy and better skills related to things like de-escalation. It's an opportunity for idea sharing, so recognizing that these individuals are experts in their own experiences, as are their families, their teachers, and their care providers, and law enforcement are also experts in their own area, but they can learn a lot from people in these populations. And we're opening this to the community, so in reviewing social media and other methods of communication, we see that there's a lot of misunderstanding about the role of law enforcement in the community in general. And so we wanted to open these dialogues up so the community members could be part of and also share their own experiences. So how do we pay for it? That's always an interesting question, right? We can have really great ideas and you may say, this is lovely, I'd like to do something similar in my own community, but how on earth would that be paid for? So my background is in grant writing, and so I was able to work with some private foundations locally to provide funding. That funding primarily went to training law enforcement members and for compensating the experts that came and trained the law enforcement, so people living with disabilities themselves. That was really important because if any of you are invited to a talk, you're going to be paid for your time and your presentation, and so we want to make sure that we are being inclusive of all the individuals that are doing training. We also had some success with community foundation funding and some other professional associations. But there's challenges to that. And I think that it would be remiss to not cover what some of those challenges are, particularly when you're bringing together segments of the population that are very different: education system, law enforcement, community service agencies, a research institution. So these are definitely things to consider if you're looking at a project like this, particularly recognizing policies can really come up. If you're working with the police unions, can also be just an element that can cause some additional considerations. So I'm curious for everyone that's here, what have your experiences been? Whether you're supporting a person with an exceptionality, it could be yourself may have an exceptionality. I use the term exceptionalities in place of the term disabilities, so I should have said that like 20 minutes ago. But I'm curious what everyone's experiences here have been.
Well, I read the book Curious Incident, and then what is it called? Right, it was a good book that sort of fits what you're saying. Okay.
I had an experience with a niece who had some significant mental health issues, and they actually have a special, in Perth, they have a special squad that go out to help specifically for either drug affected or mental health issues where the person is violent. And so they sent an entire team out, and they very well trained on how to work and interact with that person. They did a great job.
That's fantastic to hear, and I know some law enforcement agencies are advanced enough to have these kinds of opportunities where we recognize that police are not social workers and they are not trained to be social workers. Often if they wanted to be social workers, they would be. So if they're not social workers, there's a reason. But there are really fantastic people in our communities who are trained and can provide support, often in a much more effective way than law enforcement are able to. So collaboration like that.
They were still law enforcement, but they were specifically trained.
Yeah, and that's fantastic to hear. And perhaps their training in some ways may have come from people that are experts in the field.
We did also in Perth, we did a project at State Hills, which is like, a youth offender. There's kids from 10 to 18, I think there, and we found that, and there's been a lot of research that's investigated, something like 80% of the kids that are there have some type of, some type of neurodiversity, some type of intellectual disability or something, and it's so much of the we're learning is that so much of the reason that they're there came from inability to communicate sometimes, inability to express frustration.
Control behaviors, exactly. Yeah. Same with the adult prisons. They've got the same percentages. Yeah.
I worked with a student who was 16 years old. He was diagnosed with autism, and he would go on Reddit, one of these social media, and would write things. I wanna comment on other people's posts by saying things like, "Oh, I'm gonna come and kill you," or "I'm gonna bomb," something really, really serious statements. And someone on the replies was he said his name. How can I contact you and talk to you? And he gave him his Instagram handle. So he found him on Instagram, connected with him, and started chatting with him. And then the boy shared a lot of information. And at some point, that person asked him for his mother's contact and email, and he gave it. And then that person reached out to the mom and brought that to her attention. And
it worked out in that scenario that that person like had good intentions and was like, okay, how can I like actually help that person? But then his team was working with him at home and at school, started teaching him all those things, and it's like you cannot say these statements lightly. But the other piece that we really struggled with was teaching mom to, once he's mastered certain skills with us, that we have to put him in the community with our guidance, with our monitoring. And it was really, really hard to get her to that stage. She wasn't ready to let go. Which was, something interesting and taught us a lot of things.
And I think that's a really key component for talking about the support that was necessary for this young man. That support probably didn't happen in a matter of weeks.
No,
I would
absolutely.
imagine this was a years-long process. And so the earlier we can begin these conversations, recognizing that statistics show it's not an if, it's a when for many of the students we're working with, the more time we have to prepare.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I follow you because it's somewhat related in that I'm from Washington State, and my spouse, who is actually wanted to be at this session today, but he's back in the room. He does threat assessments with 45 school districts, so over 70,000 kids, and over half of the threat assessments are for kids identifying special ed. And they're level 2 of service, so they do the threat assessment. If it seems critical or concerning, then they move it to a level 2 team, which is much more of an interagency kind of team. And what's been a bit disturbing for me is that the most problematic people on that team are the school principals or administrators who just, their solution is get this kid out of my school. And the other agencies, including the police, are understanding that, no, you don't send a kid home to think about what they might do. You support them and bring them into the fold and get them connected with peers and adults and, all kinds of things. So I think, but for the last 3 years, it's been over 50% of the cases are coming from special ed. So.
I think that's a key component to that interagency collaboration.
I was thinking of the title that you had about enforcement of law. And I think that's one of the most upsetting things to me with the federal law idea is we're to find them, identify them, and provide services. But the EBD kids, once they're identified, they can only be expelled for 10 days if it's a manifestation of their disability. So they just don't identify them. And they just...
Or they identify them and you look at the reported days of being suspended and they're well over.
Way over.
Well
For sure.
over 10. So that's,
that might be better, at least if they have the record that that's their issue, rather than to just getting rid of them. And then the police, when they do find them, there's no record of what their label is because they don't want to label them. And I think in the state of Florida where we're from, there's enough issues that have been in the news where this has been an issue that's made international news where if somebody had done their job in elementary school, you wouldn't have had 18 people shot.
Yeah. I would be interested to learn about how in this project you developed the partnerships with the different organizations you have.
So it actually in many ways came out of the need. So it started with the community service agency and they very regularly interacted with law enforcement, but there wasn't a direct channel of communication. Meanwhile, a law enforcement agency, a police department, there was one officer who was very interested in this line of work. He had a friend who was also an officer. The friend's son had autism or has autism. And so they would have these kind of informal conversations. There was no formal process. Meanwhile, me as a student, I have time, right? I mean, not really, but kind of, at least more than these people in my advisor does. So I was sort of working to connect the dots and having conversations here and here and here. and just kind of got everybody together in the same room, which was by Zoom because we happened to be in different states and it was during the pandemic. But it really happened kind of organically, but everyone's speaking the same language, we're talking about the same problems. And so it was just a matter of bringing those people together. And the law enforcement agencies were so happy to have community service agencies that weren't like fighting with them because and sometimes the reality is individuals are going to be arrested and the law enforcement agency is going to take the lead on that. But having a smooth process between the community service agency can help make that happen. Meanwhile, the school district, they're already handing off their students to this community service agency because they're now at the age where they're no longer part of the school district. And so it really was just bringing those people together. And, you know, of course, sometimes there's resistance or there's just misunderstanding. We found often people don't speak the same language, so to speak. In the education system, we have our jargon and our acronyms, and well, the police have that too, and the community, and those kinds of things. So trying to remove some of those barriers, but it really just took intentionality around that. And I would say that was probably the biggest hurdle. Any final thoughts? Well, I want to thank you all for being here. This is my first time presenting at an international conference, and I'm honored to get you in the room with some really brilliant people and in that bigger room with even more brilliant people. So thank you again. Please enjoy your lunch and get a bio break in. Thank you. I hope so too.
Well, it's really.
So the biggest challenge was not to trip on it. Yes. So in the case we're going to the bigger many school districts have school-based officers, which is a wonderful resource, but also just kind of working with families and the students themselves to recognize after the transition. That is not how police departments are likely to be not. And so helping and supporting individuals that may not be a safe person for them, so to speak. Or maybe it depends. Yes. Thank you all for like being around and your help for technology, the computer. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm always very happy.
I see it sometimes. We hope.
Yeah, there's things to here, sorry. So I live in Houston now, but appreciate that. So I'm in A&M Commerce, and we have about 20 locations. I don't know where her location might be. Okay, then she'd be at College Station. Awesome.
So that's why I was asking.
That's so cool. Thank you. And I'm sure she would know my advisor is Kelly Carrero. She's was not able to be here. Yes. None of this is on the back.
Oh, well, she said Jesus is really needed. She's been worse. 8 years. She has stories about how things have changed.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And some things we can hope to change for the better.
Well, so how did you get into this?
So I worked in the human service field, and I have some family members who are members of law enforcement.
Okay.
And kind of along the way, they would, often like talk to me or talk to my social worker.
Sabe, useful भी था। सेटा वर्ष है। कितने बार में? एक मारो। क्या हो गया इसमें? फिर आएगा। ऐसा बात है। ऐसा बात है। सबका डिनर है रुपया में। डिनर है सबका रुपया में। बेटा ठीक है। ओए भयो ल चलो चलो सेटअप पे चलो
यो खत्म भएछ
खत्म भइसक्यो विश्वास नहीं है देख वो कैमरा लगा के रखा है लैपटॉप हाँ मोबाइल चाहिँ पकेटमा डालो मोबाइल चलो सेटअप में जाना है आप तीनों को चलो 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 चलो
हो गया सर चला खत्म भएछ सबै
हाँ भयो
एक क्लीन मारी रे
ऐसे देखो पकड़ी 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 क्यों पकड़ लिया चलो
अरे वो ग्लास है अभी उधर क्लीन करना है पकड़ी ना
हाँ रखो